The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council Station gleamed under the light of 3 distant stars. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its many ports, bringing delegates from hundreds of different worlds. Today was the quarterly meeting, just like it had been for the past 200 years. Ambassador Zeftar adjusted his ceremonial robes as he walked through the corridors. His 4 arms carried data tablets filled with trade proposals from the Vorthan Empire. Around him, other aliens moved with purpose. The tall, thin Kalari glided on their tentacles. The rock-like granite people stomped with heavy steps. The bird-like Aryan delegates flew overhead in the high-ceiling areas, but something felt wrong. Zeftar entered the main council chamber, a huge circular room with seats arranged in perfect circles. Each species had their designated area. The crystalline hegemony sat in their light-filled section. The insectoid swarm buzzed quietly in their darker corner. The wise Treant Confederacy had roots that actually grew into the floor of their section. His eyes searched for the human section. The seats were empty. This was strange. Humans were always early to these meetings. They brought their strange liquid called coffee and their endless notes. They asked questions that other species found annoying but somehow always led to better solutions. "Where are the humans?" asked Counselor Vexani from the Kalari Federation. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of her species. "Perhaps they are running late," Zeftar replied, though he felt uneasy. Humans were never late. They were obsessed with something they called punctuality. The session began without them. High Chancellor Morden, an ancient being from the ethereal collective, called the meeting to order. His voice echoed in everyone's mind rather than through the air. "We shall proceed with the agenda," Morden announced. First item: the trade dispute between the Saurian Republic and the Mining Guild. The discussion began, but it felt different. Usually the human representative would ask for clarification on technical details. They would suggest compromise solutions that nobody else had thought of. They would point out problems that other species missed. Without their input, the debate became heated quickly. The Saurians roared their demands. The Mining Guild representatives clicked their mandibles aggressively. Other species took sides, and the argument grew louder. "Perhaps we should contact the human delegation," suggested Elder Barkmoth from the Trent Confederacy. His voice was slow and deep, like wind through ancient forests. Zeftar tried the standard communication channels. Nothing. He sent an urgent message to Earth's embassy. No response. He even tried the human commercial networks. Silence. "This is highly irregular," muttered General Krex from the insectoid swarm. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. Humans always respond to communications. The first session ended with no progress on any agenda item. The delegates gathered in small groups, whispering about the missing humans. Some seemed worried. Others appeared annoyed. "They are probably having one of their political arguments," said Trade Minister Yilneth from the Aquatic Alliance. Her gills fluttered with dismissive gestures. Humans are always fighting among themselves. But Zeftar knew this was wrong. Human politics were complex, but they never missed council meetings because of internal disputes. In fact, they seemed to use these meetings to show unity to the rest of the galaxy. The second session began after the meal break. Still no humans. Morden tried to continue with the agenda, but every discussion seemed to stumble. The humans had become an important part of how the council worked, though nobody had really noticed until now. The debate about military patrol routes fell apart. Humans provided many of the ships for these patrols. Without knowing their position, other species could not plan effectively. The technology sharing program stalled. Human innovations had become essential to many projects. Their unique approach to problem solving had improved designs across the galaxy. Even the cultural exchange program faced problems. Human entertainment had become surprisingly popular. Their stories, music, and games were traded throughout civilized space. "We need to find out what happened to them," declared war leader Tuskara from the Orcish clans. Her massive frame leaned forward as she spoke. "This affects everyone. Emergency protocols activated. The Council's intelligence network began investigating. Scout ships headed toward human space. Communication specialists tried every frequency they knew. Hours passed. The reports began coming back, and they were all the same. Human space was quiet. Ships moved normally between their worlds. Cities functioned as usual. Military patrols continued their routes. But every attempt at outside communication was met with polite silence. Human merchant ships that had been traveling to alien worlds simply turned around and went home. Human tourists canceled their trips. Human researchers ended their exchange programs and returned to their own institutions. It was as if humanity had collectively decided to ignore the rest of the galaxy. "This makes no sense," said Chief Scientist Glimtar from the Technological Union. His mechanical parts whirred as he processed data. "All our monitoring shows normal human activity. They are just not talking to anyone outside their species." Fear began to creep into the chamber. Not fear of human aggression, but fear of human absence. Over the 50 years since first contact, humans had become more important to galactic civilization than anyone had realized. They were not the strongest military power. That belonged to the Saurian Republic. They were not the most advanced technologically. The crystalline hegemony held that position. They were not the oldest or wisest. The Trant Confederacy had been spacefaring for thousands of years. But somehow humans had become the oil that kept the galactic machine running smoothly. They solved problems. They found compromises. They connected different species who could not understand each other. Without them, everything felt harder. The session ended with nothing accomplished. For the first time in Council history, they adjourned early due to lack of progress. Delegates returned to their ships confused and worried. Zeftar stood in the empty chamber after everyone left. The human section looked strange with no one sitting there. No data tablets scattered on the desks. No cups of coffee forgotten in the excitement of debate. No humans scribbling notes while others talked. He tried one more time to contact the human embassy. The message went through, but the response was automated. "The human diplomatic mission is currently unavailable. We appreciate your patience during this period of internal reflection. Please direct all urgent matters to your local emergency services." Internal reflection. What did that mean? Zeftar gathered his things and walked back to his ship. The corridor seemed quieter than usual. Other delegates moved with less confidence. Conversations were shorter and more worried. As his ship undocked from the station, he looked back at the crystal dome. It still gleamed under the starlight, but something was different. The heart of galactic civilization suddenly felt empty. In the distance, a human cargo ship changed course and headed back toward Earth space. The pilot did not respond to standard greetings from passing vessels. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to function without humanity. The lesson would be harder than anyone expected. 3 days after the failed council meeting, the effects of human silence began to spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. What started as confusion was becoming a crisis. Trade Minister Yilnith stared at her data screens in disbelief. The Aquatic Alliance's food imports had dropped by 40% overnight. Human agricultural worlds produced some of the most efficient crops in known space. Their farming techniques worked on planets that other species found challenging. "How long can our food reserves last?" she asked her aide, a younger member of her species whose gills fluttered nervously. "Perhaps 6 months at current consumption levels," came the reply. "But that assumes no other disruptions to our supply chains." The problem was spreading. Human shipping companies had quietly become the backbone of interstellar commerce. Their ships were not the fastest or the largest, but they were reliable. They went everywhere and carried everything. Most importantly, they worked with all species without the prejudices that affected other trading relationships. Captain Rexthor of the Granite People watched his cargo hold remain empty at the spaceport. Human freighters usually picked up his people's specialized minerals and delivered them across the galaxy. Without these ships, his valuable cargo sat worthless on the dock. "When will the human ships return?" he asked the port authority. The alien official, a nervous Kalari, could only shake his head. "We have no information. All human shipping contracts have been suspended indefinitely." The crystalline hegemony faced their own crisis. Their advanced technology depended on rare elements that only humans seemed willing and able to extract from dangerous asteroid fields. Human miners were crazy enough to work in conditions that would kill most other species. They used techniques that others considered insane but somehow got results. Director Silverin watched as her research projects ground to a halt. The quantum processors that her people had spent decades developing needed materials that only came from human mining operations. "Can we find alternative suppliers?" she asked her team. "Theoretically, yes," replied her chief engineer, "but it would take months to establish new relationships, and the cost would be 3 times higher. Most species refuse to work in the environments where these materials are found. The military implications became clear within a week.
Human fleets had been quietly essential to galactic peacekeeping.
They patrolled routes that other species found unprofitable or dangerous. Their ships worked alongside alien vessels in joint operations that had kept the peace for decades. Admiral Korvac of the Saurian Republic studied tactical reports with growing concern. Human withdrawal had left huge gaps in patrol coverage. Pirates were already taking advantage of these gaps. "The void sector is completely undefended," reported his intelligence officer. 3 civilian ships have been attacked in the past 2 days. "What about our allies?" Korvac asked. "The insectoid swarm says they cannot spare ships. The Orcish clans are dealing with their own border problems. Everyone is stretched thin without human support." But the crisis went deeper than military and economic problems. Humans had become cultural translators without anyone realizing it. They understood other species in ways that those species often did not understand each other. Professor Telron from the Academic Exchange discovered this when her research collaboration fell apart. For years, her team had included scientists from 12 different species. The human researchers had somehow made communication possible between beings who thought in completely different ways. "The ethereal collective cannot work with the technological union," she explained to her supervisors. "Their mental patterns are too different." The humans were the only ones who could understand both perspectives and help them share ideas. The same problem appeared everywhere. Diplomatic marriages between species required human mediators. Trade negotiations needed human translators who understood not just languages but thinking patterns. Even entertainment productions that crossed species lines depended on human writers who could create stories that appealed to everyone. The Kalari Federation called an emergency session of their leadership council. Their entire economy was built on services and information trade. Human networks carried much of their data traffic. Human computers processed much of their complex calculations. "We are facing system-wide failures," reported Technical Director Morsul. "Our quantum networks are overloading without human processing support. Our financial systems are struggling to handle transactions that humans normally managed seamlessly." The Orcish clans discovered that their military planning had become dependent on human strategic analysis. Humans looked at battles in ways that warrior cultures found difficult to understand. They saw patterns and possibilities that pure fighting instinct missed. War leader Tuscara studied maps that suddenly made no sense. "How did we plan campaigns before humans joined the council?" she asked her advisors. "We fought wars differently then," replied an elderly strategist. "More direct. More wasteful. Human methods reduced casualties and increased success rates, but we never learned to think like them." The Traiant Confederacy, oldest and wisest of all galactic civilizations, faced perhaps the strangest problem. Their long-term planning had somehow incorporated human unpredictability as a stabilizing factor. Human chaos had become a tool for preventing larger disasters. Elder Barkmoth communed with the forest mind, the collective consciousness of his people. The ancient wisdom was confused. Humans brought change, the forest mind whispered through rustling leaves. Change prevented stagnation. Without change, patterns become rigid. Rigid patterns break under stress. The breaking point came during the second week. The Merchant Guild, which coordinated trade across half the galaxy, announced bankruptcy. Too many human-dependent contracts had failed simultaneously. Panic buying began on dozens of worlds. Species that had never worried about food security suddenly faced shortages. Worlds that had relied on human technology found their infrastructure failing. The Saurian Republic and the insectoid swarm moved ships toward a disputed mining system, sensing weakness in the galactic order. The Aquatic Alliance began hoarding resources. The Orcish clan started conducting military exercises near their borders. Council members who had barely thought about humans 3 weeks earlier now spent every waking moment trying to understand what had gone wrong. Emergency meetings were called daily, but without human participation, these sessions accomplished nothing. Ambassador Zeftar found himself appointed to head a special committee tasked with solving the human problem. The irony was not lost on him. They needed humans to figure out how to function without humans. "What do we actually know about human motivations?" he asked the committee. The answers were embarrassing. Despite 50 years of contact, no species had really studied human psychology. They had been too busy benefiting from human capabilities to understand human needs. The ethereal collective admitted that human minds were shielded from psychic investigation. The Technological Union confessed that human computer systems used security they could not crack. The academic exchange revealed that human research methods remained largely mysterious. We treated them as useful tools, admitted Counselor Vexani from the Kalari Federation. We never bothered to understand them as people. Reports from the border of human space brought no relief. Human ships politely turned away all visitors. Human colonies maintained normal operations but ignored all outside communication. Human military vessels enforced their borders without aggression, but with absolute determination. Most disturbing of all, humans seemed perfectly fine without the rest of the galaxy. Their economy continued functioning. Their society showed no signs of stress. They had cut themselves off from galactic civilization and appeared to be thriving. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humanity had not conquered through force or technology. They had made themselves essential through competence, reliability, and understanding. Now that they were gone, the complex web of galactic civilization was collapsing and nobody knew how to fix it. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council's inner circle took place in the highest security chamber of the station. Representatives from the 12 most powerful civilizations gathered around a table that had witnessed the signing of countless treaties and the resolution of dozens of wars. Today, they faced something none of them had ever encountered, a problem they could not solve through negotiation, force, or technology. High Chancellor Morden's ethereal form flickered with unusual agitation as he addressed the assembly. The situation is deteriorating faster than our worst projections. We must establish contact with humanity immediately. We have tried everything, protested Director Silverin from the crystalline hegemony. Her crystalline body resonated with frustrated harmonics. Standard diplomatic channels, emergency frequencies, even ancient first contact protocols. They acknowledge our messages but provide no meaningful response. War Leader Tuscara slammed her massive fist on the table. Then we send a fleet to demand answers. No species can simply ignore the galactic community. An uncomfortable silence followed her statement. Everyone remembered the Void War, when humanity had first demonstrated their military capabilities. Human tactics were unconventional and effective. Their technology was not the most advanced, but they used it in ways that others could not predict. Military action would be inadvisable, stated Admiral Korvac carefully. Human defensive capabilities are substantial. More importantly, we need their cooperation, not their hostility. Elder Barkmoth's ancient voice rustled through the chamber. Force will not solve this problem. We must understand why they have withdrawn before we can address their concerns. What concerns? Demanded Trade Minister Yilneth. We have treated humans as equals for 50 years. They have full council representation, trade privileges, and military alliance benefits. Ambassador Zeftar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been reviewing 50 years of council records, and what he found troubled him. Perhaps we should examine our definition of equality. The first diplomatic mission launched 3 days later. The ship carried Ambassador Krelton from the neutral administrative zone, chosen because his species had no significant conflicts with humanity. The vessel flew the Council's diplomatic flags and broadcast peaceful intentions on all frequencies. At the edge of human space, it was met by a single human patrol ship. "This is Captain Martinez of the Terran Defense Force," came the calm, professional response. "Ambassador Krelton, we appreciate your visit, but humanity is currently in a period of internal reflection. We must ask you to return to Council space." "Captain, I represent the entire galactic community," Krelton replied. "Surely we can arrange a brief meeting to discuss the current situation." "I understand your position, Ambassador. However, our instructions are clear. All external diplomatic contact is suspended indefinitely. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. The human ship did not threaten or posture. It simply waited. When Krelton attempted to proceed deeper into human space, additional ships appeared. Still no threats, but the message was clear. The ambassador returned to Council space empty-handed. The next attempt involved the academic exchange. Professor Telron led a team of scientists hoping to appeal to human researchers they had worked with for years. Surely scientific cooperation could transcend political disagreements. They were turned away just as politely and just as firmly. Dr. Chen, Telron called out over the communication channel to a human scientist she had known for decades. "This is affecting research projects across the galaxy. Can we not discuss this as colleagues?" The response came from a different voice. Professor Telron, Dr. Chen appreciates your long collaboration. However, all human academic institutions are currently focusing on internal projects. We hope to resume external cooperation in the future. When? Telron asked desperately. We do not have a timeline to share at this time. The Technological Union tried next, believing that trade relationships might provide an opening. Human mining operations were desperately needed, and surely economic incentives could overcome political problems. Director Glimtar led a delegation of engineers and traders to the asteroid fields where human miners worked. The human mining platforms were operating normally, extracting materials at their usual impressive rates. But when the delegation approached, they were informed that all materials were being reserved for internal human use. We can offer premium rates, Glimtar transmitted. Double your usual prices. We appreciate the offer, replied the mining supervisor. But we are not currently accepting external contracts. Triple rates. Our position remains unchanged. The Ethereal Collective made the most ambitious attempt. They sent their most powerful psychics to try to establish mental contact with human telepaths. Humans had limited psychic abilities, but some could be reached through mental communication. The psychics returned confused and frustrated. Their minds are shielded, reported Master Velthar. Not by technology, but by mental discipline we do not understand. It is as if they have collectively decided not to hear us. Can you break through these shields? Asked Morden. Possibly, but it would be considered a hostile act. The shielding is voluntary and deliberate. They have chosen not to listen. Fear began to replace frustration in the council chambers. Humanity was not angry or aggressive. They were simply absent, and their absence was destroying galactic civilization more effectively than any war. The Kalari Federation's economists presented a devastating report. Without human participation, interstellar trade would collapse within 6 months. The complex web of dependencies that had developed over decades could not be quickly replaced. We estimate that reconstruction of non-human trade networks would take 15 to 20 years, reported economic analyst Primtal. The cost would bankrupt most civilizations. Many worlds would face humanitarian crises. The insectoid swarm discovered that their hive mind efficiency had somehow incorporated human unpredictability as a planning factor. Without human chaos to account for, their rigid thinking led to system failures. We cannot adapt quickly enough, admitted General Krex. Our minds are not designed for the kind of flexibility that humans provided. The Aquatic Alliance faced food riots on 3 worlds. The Granite People's mining operations stalled without human engineering support. The Orcish clans found their military strategies outdated without human tactical innovations. Most shocking of all, the crystalline hegemony's advanced computers began predicting civilizational collapse within the year, if current trends continued. In desperation, the Council authorized increasingly aggressive attempts at contact. Merchant ships tried to enter human space carrying luxury goods as bribes. Cultural delegations arrived with gifts and entertainment. Religious leaders offered spiritual exchanges. All were turned away with the same polite firmness. The breaking point came when a Saurian warship, acting without authorization, attempted to force its way into human space. The ship's captain believed that a show of strength might command respect. 3 human vessels appeared within minutes. No weapons were fired, but the Saurian ship found its systems mysteriously malfunctioning. Navigation failed. Communications went silent. Life support fluctuated. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Defense Force," came a calm transmission. "Your ship is experiencing technical difficulties. We are prepared to offer assistance if you withdraw to neutral space." The Saurian captain, faced with the choice between retreat and potential disaster, chose retreat. His ship's systems returned to normal the moment he crossed the border. The message was clear. Humanity would defend their isolation without violence if possible, but they were prepared for violence if necessary. Council intelligence analysts studied every available piece of information about human activities. What they found was deeply unsettling. Human space was operating more efficiently than ever. Trade between human worlds had increased. Scientific research was accelerating. Military readiness was higher than during wartime. Humanity was not suffering from their isolation. They were thriving. "They do not need us," Zeftar reported to the emergency session. "That is the fundamental truth we must accept. We need them, but they do not need us. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. For 50 years, they had assumed that galactic civilization was mutually beneficial. They had believed that humanity gained as much from the relationship as they provided. The evidence suggested otherwise. Humans had been giving more than they received. They had been solving more problems than they created. They had been strengthening galactic civilization while their own capabilities grew in parallel. Now they had withdrawn, and the galaxy was collapsing while humanity continued to flourish. "What do they want?" asked Councillor Vexani, voicing the question that haunted every delegate. Nobody had an answer. Worse, nobody was sure how to find one. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations found themselves helpless against humanity's most devastating weapon: indifference. No army could fight it. No technology could overcome it. No diplomacy could negotiate with it. Humanity had chosen to ignore the galaxy, and the galaxy was learning that it could not survive being ignored. 3 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the galaxy was coming apart at the seams. What had started as economic disruption had evolved into something approaching civilizational collapse. Ambassador Zeftar stood in the council chamber, looking at seats that remained empty for reasons that went far beyond human absence. The Merchant Guild had dissolved entirely, taking with it the legal framework for most interstellar commerce. The academic exchange had suspended operations after 3 major research disasters caused by failed interspecies communication. Even the ancient Trent Confederacy had withdrawn from active participation, citing unprecedented disruption to the natural order. The chamber itself showed signs of neglect. Maintenance systems that had quietly depended on human technical support were beginning to fail. The crystalline walls had lost some of their shine. The environmental controls struggled to accommodate so many different species without the human-designed adaptation protocols. "Order, order," called High Chancellor Morden. Though his ethereal voice carried less authority than before, the stress of the crisis was affecting even the immortal ethereal collective. "We must address the growing conflict between the Saurian Republic and the insectoid swarm." War leader Tuscara rose to her feet, her massive frame bristling with barely contained aggression. "The swarm has violated our borders 17 times this month. Without human patrol ships enforcing the neutral zones, they grow bold. Your accusations are baseless," clicked General Krex, his compound eyes reflecting fractured images of the chamber. "Saurian expansion into the mining sector threatens our hive worlds. We act only in self-defense." The argument that followed was depressingly familiar. Without human mediators, every disagreement escalated into threats of violence. The careful balance that had maintained peace for decades was crumbling. Elder Barkmoth's ancient voice carried across the chamber. "In all my centuries, I have never seen the galactic community so divided. The humans were not our leaders, but somehow they were our center. Without a center, everything spins apart. The statistics were devastating. Interstellar trade had collapsed by 78%. Scientific collaboration had fallen to levels not seen since the early days of galactic civilization. Most shocking of all, 3 separate wars had broken out in sectors where human peacekeepers had previously maintained stability. Director Silverin of the Crystalline Hegemony presented her analysis with crystalline precision. "Our computational models indicate complete governmental collapse for 43% of member civilizations within the next 6 months. Economic recovery, assuming immediate human reintegration, would require decades." "And if humans do not return?" asked Trade Minister Yilnith, though her gills fluttered with dread at the potential answer. "Permanent regression to pre-contact development levels for most species. Some civilizations would not survive the transition. The Kalari Federation was already experiencing this regression. Their advanced information networks had depended on human-designed protocols that no one else fully understood. When those systems began failing, entire planets lost access to interstellar communication. Captain Rexthor of the Granite People brought news from the mining sectors. Pirates control 30% of the shipping lanes. Without human patrol ships, lawlessness spreads daily. Honest traders abandon routes while criminals grow stronger. The Aquatic Alliance faced the most immediate crisis. Food riots had spread to 7 worlds. Their aquaculture systems, designed with human assistance, were failing without human technical support. Professor Telran's research team had tried to help, but interspecies communication barriers made effective assistance impossible. We estimate mass starvation within 4 months, reported Emergency Coordinator Nalveth. Our people are beginning to blame the Council for allowing humanity to leave. Similar unrest was spreading across the galaxy. The Orcish clans faced internal rebellion as their military strategies, adapted to work with human forces, proved ineffective in purely alien conflicts. The Technological Union's advanced manufacturing had ground to a halt without human materials and techniques. Even the great archive worlds of the academic exchange were suffering. Human researchers had contributed to almost every major scientific breakthrough of the past 50 years. Without their unique perspectives, research had not just slowed, it had actively regressed as species fell back on old methods that no longer worked in a connected galaxy. Most disturbing were the reports from Council intelligence. Monitoring stations on the borders of human space showed a civilization that continued to thrive. Human shipping had actually increased between their own worlds. Their research output had accelerated. Their military conducted exercises that demonstrated technologies the rest of the galaxy had never seen. They are not just surviving without us, reported Intelligence Director Quoval. They are advancing faster than ever. It is as if removing galactic commitments has freed them to focus on their own development. This revelation sparked heated debate. Some council members felt insulted that humans seemed better off without them. Others worried about what a completely independent humanity might mean for the galaxy's future. We always assumed the relationship was beneficial to both sides, admitted Councillor Vexani. We never considered that we might have been holding them back. The most desperate attempt yet was authorized in the 4th month. The Council voted to offer humanity unprecedented concessions, permanent seats on the Inner Circle, exclusive trading rights in disputed sectors, territory that other species had claimed for centuries. Ambassador Krelton led the largest diplomatic delegation in galactic history. Representatives from every major civilization carried offers that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. At the border of human space, they were met by Admiral Sarah Chen herself, the human military commander who had become legendary during the Void War. Her ship, the TFS Determination, waited in neutral space for the delegation. Admiral Chen, Krelton transmitted, "We come bearing offers of partnership that address every concern humanity might have with current galactic arrangements." Chen's response was professional, but revealing. "Ambassador, we appreciate the Council's offers. However, you continue to misunderstand our position. This is not a negotiation. We are not seeking better terms or improved arrangements. Then what do you seek? Understanding. After 50 years of participation in galactic civilization, humanity has concluded that we require time for internal evaluation of our role in the greater community." How much time? As much as necessary. The delegation returned with offers rejected before they could even be fully presented. Humanity was not seeking better treatment. They had simply chosen to step away from galactic civilization entirely. The psychological impact of this rejection was enormous. Species that had never doubted their place in the galactic order began questioning everything. If humans, relatively young and supposedly less advanced, could thrive alone, what did that say about everyone else's dependence on the galactic community? The ethereal collective, ancient and wise, admitted something unprecedented. They were confused. Human motivations remain opaque to us. Their mental patterns suggest no anger, no frustration, no sense of grievance. They appear to have made a calm, rational decision that we cannot comprehend. The Technological Union faced a different crisis. Their advanced computers, when asked to model human behavior, consistently failed. Human actions did not fit any logical framework that alien minds could understand. They act as individuals, within a collective framework that maintains coherence without central control, reported Chief Analyst Tekver. Our models cannot account for this paradox. The cultural exchange program, what remained of it, provided the most disturbing insights. Human entertainment that had become popular across the galaxy often featured themes of independence, self-reliance, and the rejection of authority that demanded submission without earning respect. Their stories consistently portray scenarios where isolation leads to strength, observed cultural analyst Morphin. They appear to view independence as a virtue rather than a necessity. As the 4th month ended, reality set in. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were facing a choice they had never imagined: function without humanity or face civilizational collapse. The proud Saurian Republic, which had never admitted weakness, officially requested assistance from the Orcish clans to maintain basic security. The advanced crystalline hegemony began rationing energy for the first time in their recorded history. The ancient Trent Confederacy started calling in favors that were thousands of years old. And through it all, humanity remained silent, prosperous, and completely indifferent to the galaxy's struggles. The center had not held, and things were falling apart. The galaxy was learning that some relationships once broken might be impossible to repair. The question was no longer how to convince humanity to return. The question was whether galactic civilization could survive long enough to deserve a second chance. The transmission began at exactly 12 Corn Galactic Standard Time on the first day of the 5th month. Every human ship, station, colony, and outpost in known space broadcast the same signal simultaneously. It reached every corner of the galaxy within hours, carried by communication networks that humans had helped design and maintain. Ambassador Zeftar was in his quarters when the alert came through. Like everyone else in the galaxy, he stopped everything to listen. The message that would reshape galactic civilization was about to begin. The screen showed Admiral Sarah Chen standing on the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, Earth was visible through the massive viewports, blue and green and beautiful. She wore a simple uniform with no ceremonial decorations. Her expression was calm, professional, and absolutely resolute. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "For 5 months, humanity has remained silent while the galactic community has struggled with our absence. Today we break that silence to share what we have learned." In the council chamber, every remaining delegate watched in absolute silence. High Chancellor Morden's ethereal form had never appeared more solid or focused. War Leader Tuscara leaned forward in her chair, massive hands clenched. Elder Bark Moth's ancient eyes reflected centuries of wisdom as he tried to understand what was coming. 50 years ago, Chen continued, humanity joined the galactic community with hope and enthusiasm. We believed in cooperation, mutual benefit, and shared progress. We gave our best efforts to make that dream reality. The Admiral paused, and in that pause, every species listening felt a chill of recognition. What we discovered was different from what we expected. Through careful analysis of 50 years of diplomatic records, trade agreements, military cooperation, and cultural exchange, we have documented a pattern that troubled us deeply. Behind Chen, the display screens lit up with data. Charts, graphs, and statistical analyses that represented decades of human record-keeping. Ambassador Zeftar felt his 4 hearts sink as he recognized what the data would show. Humanity has been recording every council session, every private negotiation, every backroom agreement, and every informal conversation that our diplomatic staff could access. We have built the most complete record of galactic political interactions in known history. Director Silverin of the crystalline hegemony made a sound like crystal cracking under stress. The implications were staggering. Humans had been documenting everything while other species assumed their conversations were private. This data reveals a clear pattern, Chen continued. Across 50 years and thousands of interactions, humanity has consistently been assigned the most dangerous missions, the most expensive responsibilities, and the most complex problems to solve. We have been expected to provide solutions while being excluded from the decisions that created those problems. The evidence began scrolling across every screen in the galaxy. Military deployment records showing human forces assigned to the most hazardous peacekeeping missions. Economic data demonstrating that human worlds bore disproportionate costs for galactic infrastructure. Scientific reports indicating that human researchers did the groundwork, while other species received credit for discoveries. When dangerous pirates threatened shipping lanes, human fleets were sent to deal with them. When unstable planets needed evacuation, human ships carried the refugees. When ancient artifacts required risky archaeological investigation, human scientists took the risks. When diplomatic crises needed resolution, human negotiators were expected to find solutions. War Leader Tuscara found herself nodding involuntarily. It was true. Humans had somehow become the galaxy's problem solvers, the ones called when situations were too dangerous or too complicated for others to handle. In return, Chen said, her voice carrying a note of quiet steel. Humanity received the privilege of participation. We were allowed to attend meetings where decisions had already been made. We were permitted to bid on contracts designed to favor other species. We were invited to join research projects after the important theoretical work was complete. The data continued flowing, instance after instance where human contributions were essential, but human input was minimal. Patterns showing how galactic civilization had learned to depend on human competence while maintaining their own authority. We were not partners, Chen stated flatly. We were useful tools. Competent, reliable, efficient tools that could be deployed when other species needed problems solved. Trade Minister Yilnith felt her gills flutter with shame. She remembered how the Aquatic Alliance had automatically assumed humans would handle their food crisis during the Kalari blockade. They had not asked for help. They had simply expected it. The most revealing aspect of our analysis was what happened during crises. When the Void Pirates threatened the Outer Rim, human forces provided 87% of the military response. When the Crystalline Plague outbreak required dangerous medical intervention, 93% of the volunteer medical personnel were human. When the Great Storm disabled navigation in the Spiral sector, human ships carried out every single rescue mission. General Krex of the insectoid swarm experienced something his species rarely felt: individual shame separate from the hive mind. He remembered those crises. He remembered how naturally everyone had looked to humans to solve the problems. Yet when benefits were distributed, when territories were assigned, when honors were given, humanity received consideration proportional to our political influence, not our contributions. We were useful, but we were not valued. The evidence was overwhelming. 50 years of being taken for granted. 50 years of giving more than they received. 50 years of being essential, but not respected. 3 months ago, we decided to conduct an experiment. We withdrew from galactic civilization to observe how it would function without us. The results exceeded our projections. Chen's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes that suggested deep disappointment. Interstellar trade collapsed. Scientific cooperation ended. Military security failed. Diplomatic relationships deteriorated into open conflict. In less than 5 months, galactic civilization regressed to pre-contact levels of dysfunction. The Admiral let that sink in before continuing. Meanwhile, humanity thrived. Without the burden of solving everyone else's problems, our research accelerated. Without the cost of subsidizing galactic infrastructure, our economy grew. Without the distraction of endless crisis management, we focused on our own development. Director Glimtar of the Technological Union processed this information with mechanical precision. The data was undeniable. Humanity had been carrying a burden that nobody had recognized, least of all the humans themselves. We learned 2 important things from this experiment. First, galactic civilization is far more dependent on human participation than anyone realized. Second, humanity is far more capable of independent success than anyone imagined. Chen paused again, and in that pause the galaxy held its breath. Today, we present new terms for human participation in galactic civilization. These terms are not negotiable. They are not requests. They are requirements for our return. The screen filled with a formal document, the new Charter for Galactic Cooperation, signed by every human government and military authority. First, humanity will have permanent representation on all governing bodies, with veto power over any decision that requires human resources or personnel. Elder Barkmoth nodded slowly. After 50 years of being assigned responsibilities without authority, humans were demanding the power to refuse impossible tasks. Second, all assignments involving human military, scientific, or economic resources must be approved by human leadership before implementation. Third, cost sharing for galactic infrastructure will be proportional to economic benefit received, not military capability to enforce payment. The terms continued. Formal recognition of human contributions, equal participation in honors and territory allocation, transparent accounting of costs and benefits. Fourth, respect for human independence. Humanity reserves the right to withdraw from any agreement, mission, or responsibility with reasonable notice. The final term was the most significant. Fifth, recognition of human sovereignty. No galactic authority may override human decisions regarding human worlds. Human citizens, or human interests? Chen looked directly into the camera, and through it, into the eyes of every alien leader watching. For 50 years, we have been your problem solvers, your crisis managers, your reliable tools for difficult tasks. We have given our best efforts to make galactic civilization work. Now we offer you a choice. The Admiral's voice carried absolute conviction. Accept these terms, and humanity will return as equal partners in a galactic community based on mutual respect and shared authority. Reject these terms, and humanity will continue on our independent path while you manage your own problems. She gestured to the data still scrolling on the screens. The evidence shows that you need us more than we need you. But we believe in the potential of galactic civilization built on proper foundations. The choice is yours. The transmission ended with contact information for formal responses and a deadline. 30 days for the galactic community to decide. In the council chamber, the silence stretched for long minutes.